The New York Giants' play on the field is just the tip of the iceberg as to what continues to ail this franchise. What's at the core? We'll talk about it next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Train, a credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, to my newcomers, to my everydayers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Giant fans, on today's show, I've been reflecting on this season and what's gone wrong, and not just this season, but in seasons past. And I keep coming back to like the 5 areas that I think are a big problem. And these 5 areas that I'm going to talk about on today's show have set the franchise going backwards. In other words, we start off one way with a lot of hope at the start of the season, and then gradually things go backwards. And these are 5 areas that I think are largely to blame for that. So we'll talk about those. They are fixable, but we'll have to address the elephant in the room, and that is the people or person that is largely responsible for these 5 things that just keep popping up. So that's today's show. Again, welcome on into everybody. All right. Item number 1, letting leaders leave. There's just, we talk about continuity and the importance of continuity. We talk about the need to build up culture. Well, how are you supposed to do that when you keep turning over the roster at key areas? All right. You look at the leaders that have left this locker room over the years: Julian Love, Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney. I mean, how are you supposed to build up continuity? Seriously. You talk about building a culture in the locker room, a winning culture. But when you shuffle guys in and out, there's no continuity. And when there's no continuity, there's no flow, there's no voice, there's no guidance. You could say, well, the head coach, Brian Dable, can provide the guidance. It's not quite the same as hearing it from your peers. So you look at the leaders that have left this locker room, and now look at where the Giants are right now. Daniel Jones was elected a captain. He's no longer on the roster. Bobby Okereke is injured. Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence, 2 captains, they're on IR. Just think, if maybe you keep some of these leaders that keep walking out the door, and these are not just, guys who, stunk and they had to move on from. These are good players that they have let walk out the door. You keep some of those voices in the locker room, and just maybe, the culture's a little different. It's a little more stable. It's a little bit more of a winning culture. Look, Dable, to his credit, has done a good job, I think, getting the guys to play for him. I've mentioned before on the show that, the Giants haven't really been blown out in every single loss that they faced or they've had this year. That's, a small consolation, if you will. But just, it's interesting because after these frustrating losses, I have gone to the various players in the locker room, supposedly guys who are team leaders. And I asked them, I say, so what's the next step? Are you going to have a team, a players only meeting? What's going on? I don't know the last time the Giants ever had a players only meeting. And again, guys are just filtering out of the locker room. And that's a problem that needs to stop. You need to find a way to keep some of your leaders in the locker room. All right. Now, Item number 2 that I think has led to the destruction of the Giants, doubling down on mistakes. All right. You look at the insistence that Evan Neal is a right tackle. You look at the way they handled Daniel Jones and that contract. These are just some of the many things that you sit there and you say, why be stubborn? Why not admit and cut your losses? And, look, I get it with why they did the contract with Daniel Jones. I've explained that before. But they were ready to move on from him this year. Why not do it sooner? I just don't understand. They brought in Drew Lock and they figured, okay, well, we'll kind of give Daniel another chance because he's coming off the injury. Well, if you're looking to move on in the draft and, why not get a better bridge quarterback? Why not take a flyer on a guy? I know it's all hindsight, it's 2020, but you just sit there and you say, how many more times do you have to be, hit over the head that what you're doing isn't working? I mentioned Evan Neal. They keep insisting he's a right tackle, he's a right tackle, he's a right tackle. Folks, has anybody out there seen from Evan Neal that he is a right tackle? I mean, I get it. The coaches work with him every day, probably more hours than you and I combine. But you watch the play on the field. Is anybody convinced he's a right tackle? Balance issues continue. His technique is all over the place. I mean, at what point do you just say, hey, we whiffed on this. Let's move him inside the guard, see if we can salvage him. I think maybe that move is coming, but shouldn't it been coming like a while ago? Anyway, so you have doubling down on mistakes, prioritizing everything over talent. And when I say everything, I'm talking about positional value, analytics, and familiarity. All right, so let's start with positional value. The most famous one, you can make an argument. You could say Saquon Barkley. You could say Xavier McKinney, 2 young guys that, the Giants just weren't going to bring back. And while I understand you don't want to overspend on these guys, what I don't understand is why not at least make an offer to these guys this past, free agency period? It was almost like they gave up and threw up their hands and said, we're not even going to bother. We'll go and replace these guys in the draft. It's not as easy. Not as easy to replace, guys who are productive with guys that, are just, coming in and trying to find their way or maybe have a different skill set. I mean, look, players, coaches, GMs, they all tell us interchangeable, next man up, yada, yada, yada. We're not talking robots here, folks. We're talking people. Everybody is different. Everybody has a different skill set. Everybody has different weaknesses and strengths. Please don't sell us this line that, next man up, continuity, yada, yada. No, it doesn't work that way. It hasn't worked that way for this team. It doesn't work that way in life. Okay. I mentioned analytics. Y'all know how I feel about that. I go back to the Saquon Barkley situation where, Joe Shane was like talking about, running backs who are over the age of 27 start to lose their juice. No, it depends on the person. This is what I mean about stop treating this like you're dealing with robots or, parts that you can pull off of a shelf. These are people we're talking about. Everybody is different. A 22-year-old running back who's had a lot of wear and tear in college could be, not good. Whereas a 30-year-old running back who now is, was a late bloomer could develop into something good. So don't use that excuse with analytics. And then finally, I talked about familiarity. Look at all the former Bills that the Giants have brought to this team. Can anybody name one that really popped out and made you say, wow, good thing the Giants got this guy? I can't. I tried. I can't. So, look, I get it. When you come from an organization, a lot of times you want to bring what you know and who you know. But I've always thought that to be kind of a lazy way to do things. At some point, you have to just say, all right, I'm in a new environment, I'm in a new atmosphere, new program. You know, some of what we did before we could bring down, but maybe we need to go in a different direction. And I don't think they've done a good enough job with that, especially with personnel. All right, I've got a couple more for you, which I will get to right after this. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it so easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. You're going to love the selection and the quality you get from Omaha Steaks. So go on and check them out today at omahasteaks.com to get 50% off plus an additional $30 off with our promo code NFL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants Friday edition. I'm Patricia Trainer, your host, and we're talking about the bigger picture. Why and what has caused this franchise to just crumble? And I'm not talking about stuff this year. I'm talking about over the course of the last few years. There's just been recurring patterns that just make you sit there and say, what exactly are they thinking when they put this roster together? And, you think back or you think to where the Giants are right now with all the injuries that have popped up, with all the new faces that they've had to bring in, with all the switches, how the starting lineups look so much different. And it's at a point now where you have to look at a roster sheet to know who's who. It's like for me, I cover the team obviously every day. And by this point, in a normal season, I would know all the uniform numbers. I would know all the faces. I would know all that stuff by heart. Now, I need a roadmap. I need a roster sheet to know who's who. I need pictures to show me, which players are who in case, they're not at their lockers. It's crazy. It really is. And it's almost like training camp all over again. But anyway, let's go through a couple more reasons why this team has basically dissolved, if you will. The draft. All right. The whole point of the draft is to build your foundation. Now, granted, you want to give each draft class 3 years to fully, assess them or fairly assess them. But let me ask you guys this. Out of the 3 draft classes so far under Joe Shane, how many guys can we honestly look at and say, gee, this guy's a Pro Bowler? Or gee, this guy has all pro potential. Can we name any? Maybe Malik Neighbors, all pro, can be a Pro Bowler. I don't know. It's still too early to tell. Do you see any all pros in the match? I don't. Okay, you're talking about of the quality of an Andrew Thomas when healthy, a Dexter Lawrence when healthy, and those guys came from the previous regime. We don't have that right now with the Giants. And, the drafting, it's got to be better because other than maybe Malik Neighbors, maybe you can make that case for him. Do the Giants have anybody from their draft class that the opponent needs to say, oh my God, we got a game plan specifically to neutralize this guy? I don't think they do. Do you? I mean, that's a problem. That is definitely a problem, and that's something that needs to get better. Now, maybe, like I said, next year when things get fixed, hopefully, maybe some guys will start to really, take off in their second year, their third year, whatever. But there just hasn't been enough growth from year to year. The 2022 draft class, I think, was just not a good one in retrospect. The 2023 class, I mean, can we honestly say that those guys in their second year, the John Michael Schmitzes, the Deontay Banks, can we say that those guys have taken a step forward to where we're saying, oh yeah, these guys are on their way to Pro Bowl status or being in the top part of the league at their positions? I don't think we can. So that's a problem. Now, is it the selection? Is it the coaching? I don't know the answer to that. It could be a combination of both. All I know is the foundation of any football team is your draft class. And the drafts right now, the jury's out on them, folks. They haven't been knock your socks off type of drafts. Now, everybody's excited about this year's draft class, the 2024 class. But, let's see. Let's see how, they are in year 2, year 3. Do they continue to go up or do they tail off in this year and then start to go down? So the jury is still out there. Okay, one more thing I want to mention, which I think has been a problem and not one that we have talked about enough, is the talent a fit for what the coaching staff wants to do? All right, I mentioned Deontay Banks, who was drafted. His strength was press man corner. He's been asked to play a lot of zone coverage in this new defense brought in by Shane Bowen, and the results have not been good. You look at Bobby Okereke. I've mentioned how his performance this year, before he got hurt with the back injury, how his performance has kind of dropped off of a cliff. Guys don't suddenly get bad from one year to the next. Usually there's something behind it. It could be what they're being asked to do. It could be the scheme. It could be any number of things. Wan'Dale Robinson's another guy, all right? I kind of expected a little bit more from Wan'Dale Robinson, and it's not all his doing, but the more you look at how they lean on him, it's kind of like, okay, what do they want this offense to really be? Do they want it to be, one that stretches the field? Do they want it to be, we'll get the ball into the hands of our playmakers on short and intermediate routes and let them pick up the yak? I'm not sure, I know exactly what the identity of this offense is. And I question whether the coaches really know and the players really know what they're supposed to be. Injuries aside, personnel issues aside, what is the identity of this offense? It's not a great offense. We could say that. It hasn't been a productive offense. We can definitely say that. It's had a revolving door at quarterback, which, unfortunately has just happened like last year. But what is the identity of this offense? I mean, they talk about, we're still developing an identity. Well, shouldn't you know what you want the offense to be and then look to build towards it? I mean, I just don't understand their whole philosophy and their whole approach here. And when you don't know what your identity is, it's kind of hard to be consistent, to be cohesive. It's almost like they're flying by the seat of their pants. And I don't think that's the way to build a successful team. I really don't. And look, we've seen it. The proof is in the pudding. All right. The Giants have struggled on offense. You can also make the same case for the defensive side of the ball. What's their identity? Right now, the Giants' identity is they're not a very good football team. That's not the identity I can guarantee you they wanted to be known for. But that's where we're at right now with this team. So, that being said, I've talked about some of the problems on this team that I think have caused this team to really go down the tubes. So, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room in the next segment. What do they do to address the problems? And you'll see where I'm going with this right after this. Hey, Giant fans, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. You think the Giants are going to, who are a 16.5 point underdog, you think that point spread is going to hold up? Well, head on over to FanDuel and place your bet. One of many bets that you can place over on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can also check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more all on the very same page where you place your bets. So go on, visit FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. And don't forget, Monday, I'll have takeaways on the Giants-Ravens game. Hopefully, it's not going to be as bad as I think a lot of us think it's going to be. But we'll talk about it. You know, Tommy DeVito's getting the start. The no-name defense, as we're affectionately calling them, they'll be back on the field trying to stop Derrick Henry. The Ravens a 16.5 point favorite, according to FanDuel, the latest odds from FanDuel. Is it going to be an ugly one? Gosh, I hope it's not. But if it is, we'll be back with obviously observations. Regardless, win or lose, we'll have observations for you on Monday. And we'll just have a venting session, a therapy session as we need it, as we always do here on Locked On Giants. All right, so I'm talking about reasons why this Giants team has basically shattered and not been very good. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The guy who oversees it all, Joe Schoen, the general manager. Should he be back or should he go? Now, it's interesting, folks. When the Giants hired Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, you had a first-time GM and a first-time head coach. And you kind of knew that the two of them were going to have to cut their teeth, that they were going to have some growing pains. And along came that great first season in 2022 where they made the playoffs and everything looked all rosy and we all got excited and optimistic. And then everything came crashing down. And along the way, there have been mistakes made. I just outlined for you several mistakes that have been made, all correctable, by the way. So here's the big question that I think ownership needs to address. Do they want to continue with letting a general manager who, as bright as he might be, as maybe focused as he might be, but yet as inexperienced as he currently is, do they want to continue with letting him feel his way, with letting him double down on players, with the drafts being, meh, Do they want to continue that? Or is it time to just say, you know what? Let's get somebody in here with some experience who can fix this. Because, at this point, the fan base is getting tired. I'm sure ownership is not happy. They can't possibly be happy. It's just been rinse and repeat with this team, year in and year out, with a few exceptions. And insanity is just doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Now, personally speaking, I don't want to see Joe Schoen get fired. Having said all that, I do think he has a clue. I think he knows what needs to be done, but knowing what needs to be done and actually doing it, two very different things. And that's where Joe has come up short. I've mentioned, actually, I didn't mention it on this show, but in the past, I know I've mentioned it. I didn't like how he handled the Saquon Barkley negotiations this past year. All right. They never really made an offer to Barkley. And you could say, well, wait a minute. They made offers to him, the year before. Well, I get that, but Barkley said no. And I get that. But to let the market set the value, that's just playing with fire, in my opinion, because you're never going to win that battle, especially when you're talking about a good player. And while I understand why Joe let Barkley walk, and I don't necessarily disagree with it because the offensive line needed to be fixed, you also had other issues that just kind of made it impossible for them to, contemplate even being competitive. So that all said, I do think Shane will be back. I do think, for the sake of continuity, and I know there's not much continuity, he will be back. As I have said before, if you scrap the head coach and the GM, now you're starting all over again. Now your guys who are in their prime, the Andrew Thomases, the Dexter Lawrences, the Brian Burnses, all those guys, they're probably going to have another 2 years worth of wear and tear before the team gets any good to being built up to where the next regime, gets it, to where it needs to be. So it's really a sticky situation for Giants ownership, but I do think that at the end of the day, they will retain Joe Shane. Will there be changes that they ask him to make? I think that is a possibility. I've outlined, like I said, some of the things that I feel he has not done well in his regime. We'll see what happens with Brian Dable, which is a totally different topic. But right now, here's what we need to see for these remaining 4 games. The Giants need to be competitive, right? I don't think they win any of these last 4 games. If they get blown out, that's not good. If they are able to stay competitive, that maybe serves as a lifeline. Is it good enough? Well, you know what, folks? The season's over anyway. So just play out the string. Do your evaluation. You're getting a chance to look at some of these younger guys that you're probably going to bring into training camp next year. Get a head start on that and make a positive out of what has been a very big negative season for the New York Giants. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with us here. Hopefully better days are ahead for us all here on the in the land of the Giants. Don't forget, on Monday, I will have takeaways from the Giants-Ravens game, so I hope you will tune in. We'll probably need another venting session for that one. And just remember, folks, we're all in this together. So that being said, everybody have a good weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.